Hello, I'm R.A. Spratt, and I want to welcome people joining us this week on the Yoto podcast platform. Now, just so you know, most of the bedtime stories I tell here are standalone stories. But over the last year, we have been dipping in and out of the epic story of Odysseus, the hero from ancient Greek mythology. And this week, I'm going to be telling the second last installment of that tale. So if you can jump in right here, that'll be fine. I'm sure you'll pick it all up. But if you did want to go back to the beginning and start from the first episode, you can search back through the episodes. The first episode's called Odysseus, as told by Nanny Piggins, and it dropped on January 8th, 2025. Or you can go back and listen to any of the other episodes. You're going to find fairy tales, myths, legends, and mysteries. I hope you enjoy them all. Now let's get into it. Hello and welcome to Bedtime Stories with me, R.A. Spratt. All right, well, this is the bonus episode I promised you because my new book, Romeo V Juliet, has come out this week. So my publisher, Penguin, bless them, has kindly let me use a recording from the audiobook to share with you. So it's the first 3 chapters of the audiobook. I'm going to insert it into this episode. Now, the reason it's a bonus episode and not a regular episode is because Romeo V Juliet, the book, is for slightly older kids, like in years 5 and 6, so I guess sort of 10, 11, 12, and older, high school kids as well. So if you're younger than that, I don't think there's anything really inappropriate in the first 3 chapters or really in the whole book, but it's Shakespeare, so that, there's a lot of like sword fighting and stuff. So just check with your grown-ups that Chapter 1. Set Text. Slap! It was Monday morning, and Ms. Karim was handing out copies of the text they would be studying that term by tossing them onto the desks of each student. It made a dramatic slap sound as the book hit the melamine surface of the desktop. Slap! Slap! Ms. Karim liked making sudden dramatic noises. It kept the students on their toes. It woke up the teenagers who were starting to drift off to sleep as well. Selby secretly quite liked Ms. Karim. She was tough and always a hair's breadth away from losing her temper, but only because Ms. Karim loved literature so much. She didn't hold grudges against her students. She just carried on as if she were waging a one-woman war against their ignorance. Slap! A book landed in front of Selby. It took her brain a moment to comprehend what she was looking at. Suddenly, she didn't like Ms. Karim so much anymore. No, muttered Selby, staring in horror at a copy of Romeo and Juliet. Selby was frightened of Shakespeare. Not the man, he was dead. She wasn't frightened of him. She was frightened of his words, the power of his words, specifically the power she had when she said his words. Because the last time Selby had read aloud from a Shakespeare play was when she was studying Hamlet, and she had been sucked back through time, space, and reality to the Danish castle in the thick of the action. It had been a traumatizing experience. Dan Nakube, her tutor, had been sucked into the play with her, and they'd both had several near-death experiences. When you buy tickets to see a play performed at a theatre, if it's got a high death count, that's considered entertainment. It's very different when you're actually there in the room. To be present when someone loses control of themselves, lashes out, and ends another person's life is horrifying in a way that is impossible to express, even with Shakespeare's beautiful words. Selby never wanted to go through that again, ever. Yes, that's right, said Miss Karim. We're going to be studying Shakespeare's most famous love story. You're welcome. Several students groaned. Selby's pulse had already accelerated. She was feeling sweaty. She was starting to panic. She tried to concentrate on breathing normally. This wasn't so bad, she reasoned to herself. So long as she didn't read the play aloud, she would be safe. The problem was that reading silently was difficult for Selby too. Before he left for university, Dan had convinced Selby's parents to get her tested for dyslexia. And unsurprisingly, to her at least, it was a shock to her parents, it had been confirmed that she had a raging case of it. It was supposed to be a good thing. Now the school made accommodations when Selby sat exams. She got longer to read the questions, and her exam paper was printed in a larger font. She also had coaching with a dyslexia specialist once a week who taught her strategies to help with her reading. Selby knew it was all good for her, but she preferred being undiagnosed. She was comfortable going under the radar and being ignored. It was what she was used to. Being accommodated and helped made her uncomfortable. It made her teary. She wasn't used to people being nice. It was much more relaxing when she'd been allowed to do badly, and everyone blew up at her once a year. That one day of the year was bad, but the other 364 days of the year were much more restful. "How long do we have to read it?" asked Selby, flicking through the book. Plays were much shorter than novels, but it was Shakespeare, so the language was harder, and each line would take time to decipher. "You're not going to read it," said Ms. Karim. "Hooray!" The students who were listening cheered lamely. "You're going to be performing it," said Ms. Karim. "What?" said Selby. "I've been teaching Shakespeare for 20 years, said Miss Karim. "I know what teenagers are like. None of you will read it if you can avoid it. If I send you home with a copy of the play, you'll never open it voluntarily. If you do, you're so willfully determined to not enjoy it, you won't make an effort to understand what it's about. So I'm not giving you that choice. You are putting on a production in 9 weeks. If we rehearse it week in, week out, you won't be able to avoid learning the lines. You'll know the plot because you'll be acting it out." "But that's not fair," said Taylor. "I know," said Miss Karim. "Life isn't fair, which is why this is such a brilliant lesson plan. You learn about Shakespeare and the cruelty of life. It's a win-win situation. I can't believe it took me 20 years to figure it out." "Are we going to have auditions?" asked Beth. "No," said Miss Karim. "We don't have time for that. We need to get started." She walked over to her desk, which was covered in a mess of papers, books, and stationery. After shoving a few things aside, she found a single sheet of paper. "Do you see this?" She held it up. They couldn't read it from that distance, but it looked like a list. "This is a list of the parts," said Ms. Karim. She stuck it to the whiteboard using magnets. "You're all going to come forward and put your name down next to the part you want." "But what if 2 people want the same part?" asked Pauline. "The person who puts their name down first gets it," said Ms. Karim. Pauline didn't wait to hear more. She leapt up from her desk and bolted to the front of the classroom. Several other students followed. Eventually, everyone got up and walked forward to put their name down. Selby was one of the last to make her way to the front. She was dreading finding out what part was left. She prayed the drama kids had snapped up all the main roles. Then she saw the words "set crew." Relief flooded through her. "If I put my name down for set crew, does that mean I won't have to act?" asked Selby. "Yes," said Miss Karim. Selby smiled. She didn't often smile, certainly not at school. There wasn't often cause, but she was very happy as she carefully wrote her name down for set crew. "Although you will be an understudy," said Miss Karim. Selby's head snapped around. "What?" "You'll also be the understudy for Juliet," replied Miss Karim. Selby was horrified. That was the biggest part. She glanced up the list to see who would be playing it. Pauline. Selby breathed a sigh of relief. There was no way that Pauline would not be going on. Pauline loved to perform. She'd taken ballet classes since she was 3, voice lessons since she was 4, and she'd been bleaching her hair blonde since she got a part-time job at the chemist and an employee discount on peroxide. She was born to be a star. She loved the limelight, she loved adulation, and she was genuinely beautiful and talented, so she always got both. Nothing would stop her from turning up and playing the part. If Pauline went swimming and got her foot caught in a giant clam, she would cut her leg off to make sure she got to the performance. If she was being held hostage by terrorists, she would overpower them and defuse their bombs to make sure she was there for curtain up. Selby knew she would not have to learn the lines. All she would have to do is paint the sets and build a few props. She could handle that. Chapter 2. Rehearsals. It turned out rehearsals weren't so bad. Selby only had to pay attention at the beginning when Ms. Karim would give a lecture on the play. She knew she could only hold the class's attention for about 10 minutes, so Ms. Karim would teach them something for that length of time, then start blocking out scenes and running lines, the fun stuff. It was an ingenious lesson plan, really. After just 2 weeks of rehearsals, the boys knew parts of the play back to front. Admittedly, only the fight scenes, but they really, really knew those fight scenes. They loved yelling the abuse at each other as well. Today we're going to be talking about Romeo and Juliet's ages, said Miss Karim. Which are gross, said Bethany. Yes, well, that is actually true, conceded Miss Karim, and that is why I'm changing them. You can't change Shakespeare, said Olivia. It's Shakespeare. Isn't that like changing the Bible or something? Normally, yes, I would agree with you, said Miss Karim, but in this instance, I don't. What are you even talking about? Asked Barry. What's gross? You haven't read the play yet, have you, Barry? Asked Olivia. Of course I haven't read it. It's not in English, said Barry. Ms. Karim sighed. You just knew she was mentally counting to 5 to calm herself. Shakespeare did write in English, early modern English, she said. You know that. We've had this conversation before. The phrasing and old-fashioned words are challenging but not impossible to understand. You just need to try. There's lots of movies, said Wendy. Just watch one of those. There will be no watching the movie, yelled Ms. Karim. You are nearly adults. You can read a play. It won't kill you. You will learn something. I don't care if you find it hard. I don't care if you don't enjoy it. Just read the play. It will do you good. Aren't you supposed to be fostering our love of literature? Asked Misha. Well, you're not fostering my love of teaching, said Ms. Karim, so the gloves are off. Where was I? What were we talking about? The ages, said Selby. Yes, said Miss Karim. It was rare for Selby to speak in class, but she didn't like seeing Miss Karim suffer. In Shakespeare's play, Juliet is 13. 13! Exclaimed Barry. You see, you should have tried harder to read it, said Olivia. It's not all boring. Yes, the text is very specific, continued Miss Karim. There is a discussion between Lady Capulet and Juliet's nurse where they talk about Juliet's age. They say that she is 13 and about to turn 14 in 2 to 3 weeks. In the play, they contextualize this as normal by saying that the nurse was even younger when she got married. You see, gross, said Misha triumphantly. Yes, it is, said Miss Karim. It also doesn't make any sense. In Shakespeare's time, the average age of marriage was 23 for women and 26 for men. So why did he make the characters so young? Asked Barry. That is a good question, said Miss Karim. I'm giving you a pass for that. You're giving me a passing grade for the whole course? Asked Barry. No, I'm giving you a trouble pass, said Miss Karim, so that next time I send you to the principal's office, you can say, I'm using my pass from the one time I asked a good question. Then you don't have to go. Oh, cool, said Barry. To understand the play, you need to understand the context, said Miss Karim. Shakespeare never would have expected people to be reading and performing his plays 400 years after his death. He wrote them for his own time, and in his time, there were no female actors. All the roles were played by men and boys. Why? Asked Taylor. That is itself complicated, said Miss Karim, but the easiest answer is for religious reasons. England was a Christian country. The concept of feminism didn't exist. Women couldn't vote, they couldn't own property, and they were expected to behave modestly. It was illegal for women to act on the stage. They should bring that back, laughed Barry. So you never want to see a woman in a movie ever again, asked Wendy. Who would all the action heroes save? Huh? Said Barry. So what this meant in practical terms for Shakespeare, the playwright, was that the characters of Juliet, the nurse, and Lady Capulet would all have been played by boys. Therefore, to distinguish between the ages of the characters, Lady Capulet and the nurse would have been played by older boys, and Juliet would have been played by a young boy. That was just the reality that Shakespeare would have been working with. So Shakespeare made the character almost 14. But Shakespeare did not write the story. He didn't, asked Max, but his name is on the cover. He wrote the play, said Miss Corinne, but the play was based on a poem. And that poem was based on a French translation of an Italian novella. What's a novella? Began Simon. A novella is just a short novel, snapped Miss Corinne. Would it kill them to call it a short novel, muttered Barry. The novella was by Matteo Bandello, said Miss Corinne. He really did live in Verona, and for him the story was a contemporary tale. Shakespeare lifted the plot and all the character names from this novella. So you're saying that Shakespeare was a plagiarist? Said Wendy. No, Shakespeare was retelling an earlier story, said Miss Karim. That's what writers do. Bandello's novella, Romeo V Juliet, would have been inspired by earlier folk tales. He stole that too, said Barry. There were no copyright laws in the 1500s, growled Miss Karim. We are not going to digress into a discussion about the injustices of 16th century copyright law. I just want to make the point that in the original story written by Matteo Bandello, the ages of Juliet and Romeo were 18 and 22, which is much more respectable and in keeping with the actual ages that people got married in England and Italy at that time. So, given that we are not limited by Protestant religious laws curtailing the gender of our casting, we will have girls playing the female characters. And to ensure the production is in keeping with our current moral standards, I am returning the characters to their original ages. Still feels wrong to change Shakespeare, said Elliot. Shakespeare didn't even spell his own name the same way twice, said Miss Karim. If he were alive, he'd be fine with it. And he's not alive, so he can't complain. Now that that's out of the way, let's start rehearsal. From the top, Act 1, Scene 1. Over the weeks, Selby enjoyed the whole process of set building. It was like one big, complicated craft project, with lots of satisfying details to accomplish one at a time. She was coming to really enjoy Romeo and Juliet, but that was in no small part because of the wonders of modern earbud technology, which meant that in the 9 weeks of rehearsal, she had never, not once, heard the play. She'd been concentrating so hard on her creations, she hadn't seen much of it either. Selby found that when she didn't see or hear it, she really liked Shakespeare. For Selby, the real drama had been at the bookshop. Selby's parents ran the only bookshop in town. It was a classic, old-fashioned bookstore, long and narrow, a bit jumbled and overcrowded, with a kids' section down the back. They lived above the store, literally right in the middle of the main street. It was the type of small town where everyone knew everyone, and everyone dobbed on badly behaved teenagers. Several customers had reported their sightings of Selby to her mum. "What are you doing at the council tip?" demanded Mum one afternoon when Selby was re-alphabetising the children's section. Children never put books back where they were meant to be. "Nothing," said Selby. This was instinctive. She always denied everything. Sometimes Mum accused her of things so suddenly that she couldn't form a coherent explanation, even if there was one. "Mrs. Dunk said she saw you dragging a bomb down the street," said Mum. "She was probably just trying to distract you from the romance novels she'd hidden in her handbag," said Selby. Mrs. Dunk was a beloved figure in their town's community, devoted member of the Uniting Church and an active participant in every CWA bake sale. She was also a shoplifter. Everyone knew it. The shopkeepers just sent an invoice to her son for whatever she stole. "I know it was misdirection," said Mum, "but she still said she saw you with a bomb." "Mrs. Dunk is 87 and senile," said Selby. "She is not senile," said Mum. "She suffers from kleptomania. It's different." "They don't have bombs at the tip," said Selby. "How would you know if you're not doing anything there?" demanded Mum. "Well, I have been going there," admitted Selby, "but only because I have to for school." "They're teaching bomb-making now, are they?" asked Mum. "That's one way to teach chemistry, I suppose." "No, for the play," said Selby. "I've got to find props." "You're doing a play?" asked Mum. Her face lit up. Selby winced. She was hoping to keep this fact from her mother until after the performance. "Not me, the other kids," said Selby. "I'm just making props and painting the sets." "You're involved in producing a play?" demanded Mum. She was getting a happy and excited look on her face. Selby hated that her mother was always mad with her, but she hated it when her mother got happy and excited about what she was doing even more. Raised expectations only led to greater falls when the disappointment in her actual behaviour inevitably happened. "It's just for English class. It's no big deal," said Selby. "Miss Karim is putting on Romeo and Juliet." "Shakespeare!" exclaimed Mum. "How wonderful!" Mum had a master's degree in English literature. She could get as excited about a play as regular people would get about a lottery win. "When's the performance?" "I don't know," lied Selby. She did not want her mum to attend. "I know you're lying," said Mum. "You know I will find out. Are they selling tickets?" "I'll have to ask," said Selby. Again, lying. She knew they weren't selling tickets. They were giving them away. She had 6 in her school backpack right at that moment. Everyone in the production had been given them. I'm going to call the school, said Mum. This is wonderful. I'm going to tell Dad. It's ages since we last saw a play. Mum bustled off to the back of the shop. Selby's heart sank. This was going to be so embarrassing. She didn't know in what way, but she was 100% sure that it would be somehow. Chapter 3. Bad News. It was 3 days before the first performance. Selby was sitting in class ignoring her maths teacher and staring out the window, watching a bird eat a worm, when there was a knock at the door. A messenger came in and handed the teacher a note. "Selby," said Mr. Brecht, "Ms. Karim wants to see you." Selby's blood ran cold. This was not good. There was no good reason Ms. Karim would want to see her. Selby mentally ran through everything she'd done in the past week, trying to remember if she'd done something bad. She couldn't think of anything, but she knew herself and realised she was capable of disappointing adults without even being consciously aware of it. By the time Selby walked out to the English staff room, she was a nervous wreck. She seriously considered making a run for it, but she didn't really enjoy running, so she decided to be brave instead. She knocked on the staff room door. "Come in," someone yelled from inside. Selby pushed open the door. "Ah, Selby, it's good to see you," said Miss Karim with a smile. "How are you?" Selby's instinct to flee kicked in again. She had never heard Miss Karim ask a student how they were before. She couldn't remember ever having seen her smile either. Something was definitely wrong. Either Miss Karim wasn't Miss Karim, she was an alien cyborg programmed to replicate Miss Karim, or something really bad had happened. "Are my parents dead?" asked Selby. "No," said Miss Karim, recoiling in alarm. "At least, I don't think so. Why would you say that?" "No reason," lied Selby. "I wanted to talk to you because I have very good news," said Miss Karim. "Okay," said Selby, already 100% certain that anything Miss Karim thought was good news would, in fact, be bad news. "Pauline Lee has fractured her spine," said Miss Karim. Selby's brain stalled. She did not know what to make of this statement. She did not particularly like Pauline Lee. Selby thought Pauline was narcissistic and silly, but Pauline had never bullied her personally. Selby was considered by the school bullies to be too boring to bother bullying, so there was not one part of her that was happy to hear that Pauline had fractured her spine. "Is she going to be okay?" asked Selby. "Oh, yes," said Miss Karim. "It's just a crack. She was doing a ballet performance, went for a triple pirouette and missed the edge of the stage. No damage to the spinal cord, but she does have to be in traction for 6 weeks." "Oh," said Selby. "Which is very sad for her," said Miss Karim. "But good news for you, because now you get to play Juliet." "What?" exclaimed Selby. "You're the understudy," said Miss Karim. "You'll have to step in and perform." "I can't," said Selby. "You have to," said Miss Karim, getting stern. "But no, I can't," said Selby. "I don't know any of the lines." "How can you not know the lines?" demanded Miss Karim. "We've been in rehearsal for 9 weeks. You've been there the whole time working on the sets. You must have heard the play dozens of times." "I was wearing earbuds," said Selby. "What?" said Miss Karim. "I prefer not to have anything to do with Shakespeare," said Selby. "I have post-traumatic stress issues from when we did Hamlet." "Huh?" said Miss Karim, her forehead scrunching up so far it looked like a walnut. "You don't get to have PTSD from Shakespeare." "But I do," said Selby. "Everyone has to study Shakespeare," said Miss Karim. "I don't care if you don't like it. I don't care if you don't enjoy it. You have to do it. It's in the curriculum." "I find it very triggering," said Selby. "I find students triggering, but I still turn up to work every day," said Miss Karim. "Do you know why?" Selby had the good sense to realise this was a rhetorical question, so she didn't respond. She just braced herself for Miss Karim's next wave of yelling. "Because I have to, or I won't get paid. Because I'm a teacher," said Miss Karim. "Just like you're a student, and you have to do things you don't want to do, like studying Shakespeare." "But I really can't play Juliet," said Selby. "I can't say the words." "Are you scared of performing in front of an audience?" asked Miss Karim. "Yes," said Selby, "but I'm mainly scared of getting sucked into the play." "I don't care," said Miss Karim. She didn't realise that for Selby this was a genuine concern. Miss Grimm assumed that by sucked in, Selby just meant getting engrossed in the play. We all spent 9 weeks working on this. We need a Juliet. Can't someone else do it? Asked Selby. No, you're the understudy. It's your job, said Miss Grimm. You will go on stage tomorrow night and perform the play. But I don't know the lines, said Selby again. You'd better start studying then, said Miss Grimm. I can't learn the whole play in 24 hours, said Selby. Then you can take the book on stage and read it, said Miss Grimm. I'm dyslexic, said Selby. I read slowly. That's fine, said Miss Grimm. You can say the lines as slowly as you like, but you are saying them. What if I refuse, said Selby. Excuse me, said Miss Grimm. What if I refuse to go on, asked Selby. Then I would have to escalate the situation, said Miss Grimm. I would have to call your parents. Selby visibly flinched. I recall they were very upset last time they discovered you had failed to read the English set text, said Miss Grimm. Miss Grimm was right. Selby's parents had been beyond angry. She could have handled angry, but the way her parents had reacted was much, much worse. They were disappointed. Selby did not want to live through that again. Selby did not know what to say. Miss Grimm knew she'd won. Go home and read the play tonight, said Miss Grimm. You'll be fine on stage. You can read straight from the book. The audience will understand. Even professional productions sometimes have understudies reading from the script. All you have to do is say the words so the play can go ahead. I'll see what I can do, said Selby, inwardly calculating whether she had enough money to get on a train, go interstate and change her identity. She must have looked very sorry for herself because Miss Grimm tried to be kind about it. Your classmates are a lazy, apathetic bunch of ingrates who have zero appreciation of literature and only take my class because they have to meet the bare minimum requirement to graduate, Miss Grimm said. But this semester, with this play, they have actually tried. They have actually learned something. Don't ruin that for everyone else by letting them down. Selby couldn't speak. She knew nothing she could say could persuade Miss Grimm to change her mind. And she knew if she tried to form words, she'd probably start crying. She could hear her blood racing, pulsing in her ears. Adrenaline had kicked in. Her fight or flight mode had been triggered. Although for some reason with her, it was fight or flight or burst into tears mode.
All right, well, we'll leave it there. I hope you enjoyed that extract from my new book, Romeo V Juliet. So if you'd like to read further, you can buy the book from any bookstore in Australia or online bookstore, or the audiobook is available from all the places you can download audiobooks like Audible, Spotify, Apple Books, you name it. And the ebook's also available. It's all out now. And get out there and try it. I hope you enjoy it. All right, that's it for now. Goodbye. Hello, it's me again. If you enjoyed listening to Bedtime Stories with R.A. Spratt, it would be really helpful if you could like, subscribe, follow, and or review the show on whatever podcast platform you're listening to now. Every little one of those digital affirmations helps, and the bigger this podcast gets, the more I can justify procrastinating from my real job to keep bringing these stories to you. Thank you.